Natalia Lumpers, Northport Estates. I read your report about the easements, and I do not see easements to be mentioned in front of our lots or street easements. I have from, in a sense, city's court order. Okay, I will start with 2016. Assistant City Attorney at that time, Ms. Slayton. Just a second. Said the city holds, that is for Tropical Boulevard, okay? The city holds a right-of-way easement. Here, the General Development Corporation dedicated a right-of-way easement to the city via plat. Therefore, respondents own the fee to the center of the roadway, including the fee underlying the city's easement. Again, the city holds a right-of-way easement. This brief was given probably to city and to us 4 or 5 times as an evidence that city has only easement on Tropical Boulevard, okay? City's court order from November 2017 says, the section of right-of-way adjacent to respondents, which are us, respondent's property is not owned by the petitioner in fee title, but is a public easement running in favor of petitioner and the public in general. From Assistant City Attorney Michael Golan, December 2018. The city holds a right-of-way easement. And again, the city enjoys a right-of-way easement. That's again for the Tropical Boulevard. Here I have from the last court order. It says the respondent's position is that if petitioner owns the right-of-way known as Tropical Boulevard, adjacent to respondent's platted lots in fee simple, then the respondent cannot be obligated under the petitioner's ordinances and codes to maintain any portion of that right-of-way. The hearing officer agrees that if the petitioner owns the right-of-way, which is the subject of this case in fee simple, then the respondent's position has merit. However, the hearing officer finds that the right-of-way, which is the subject of this case, is only an easement which runs in favor of the general public and petitioner.
Thank you.
Okay, it's easement and you have to address that.
Thank you.
It is not about cutting the grass, it is about ownership.
Okay, we can move on. Thank you very much. Anybody that has any questions for?
Yeah, a couple of their questions and comments that they've
Sure.
made, I actually have on here.
Sure.
Because I was looking at the backup material and I didn't see anything noted for the front as far as an easement. So maybe we just, if we could start at the very beginning and help everybody understand the difference between a right-of-way and an easement. Are they the same thing? Are they two separate things? What makes them different? Why is one called a right-of-way and one called an easement?
Can I piggyback with that too? I think something that needs to be understood is there's a difference between taking care of those easements for drainage versus aesthetics. And we do have a code that states that the resident in an improved lot has to take care of it aesthetically. And our discussion later will be addressing, does the city take over the drainage part of it? So hopefully we'll be straightening that out in a later meeting. But I believe it's relevant right now too, to understand whether we're talking about drainage or whether we're talking about aesthetic where it can't be any taller than 12 inches.
I would assume if you're taking care of it aesthetically, then the drainage problem is not a problem. So we're talking about the areas.
Exactly.
Right.
I think it all blends together, and I think there's a confusion of when, we talk about mowing it so that it's less than 12 inches versus caring for it for drainage. And we take care of those undeveloped, but we have a code that says if you, exactly, then that's for aesthetics, so there's a difference.
I agree with you. We're gonna be tackling that part of it later, so.
But I think it comes relevant
And
in the
it'll do
thought
full
process, exactly.
I will give certainly some information that I can. City attorney may have some information as well on legal definitions. Not only did I not stay at a Holiday Inn Express last night, I'm not an attorney either, but, so I won't get into the legal side of it, but probably will touch on it some. Some of the differences here is, it was talked about ownership versus an easement or the right-of-way. Owning the property and having an easement on it just means that, we may not own the underlying property, but we have an easement on both sides, back and front yard of a lot of these properties, which means that it can't be restricted without permission. You can't, just like we're talking about whether you be putting a shed in there, maintenance easement, we have to have ability to get to it. So you can't put the property owner may own all the way to the middle of the street, they can't put a fence in the middle of the street because we have the right of way and the easement to use those, as well as the drainage ditch and the swale. As far as like mentioning aesthetics versus drainage, I'll just use my own house. I mow our yard is mowed, whether it be depending on the time of year, every week, every other week, once a month, depends how fast the grass grows. I mow the swale and I take care of that, which aesthetically, because I want my grass to look a certain way. We have a code also that states it can't be more than 12 inches. That being said, over time, as rain comes, natural forces take some of the dirt off of the front of the yard and they build that swale up. Our public works folks come along and they maintain the swale for drainage so the water can flow through the whole drainage system, because as nature takes effect, the dirt doesn't come down evenly. So sometimes you can get a high point, which will stop the water. It may get in front of the drainage pipes. Various reasons can cause the drainage aspect to not work as well. Even though it might look aesthetically pleasing, it may not be drainage-wise functioning properly. So they'll come by and they dig out the swale. They make sure it's so that it's all at the right angle so water can flow, the whole system works. They put new grass down and everything. But that's again the difference between aesthetics and drainage purposes is ensuring, aesthetics, it can look as pretty as can be and have bumps in it that's going to cause the drainage side to not work. Just like it can be as, the drainage can be working fine and it can be as ugly as can be because it may not be the way I want my front yard to look. It doesn't mean the drainage side is not working. So it's a combination of the two. What we do in public works is we maintain the drainage side. We want that water to flow. We want it to absorb at the right places. If it's sitting in your swale overnight, that's not mean that it's not draining properly. If it's sitting there for a week, then it's probably not draining properly, assuming that it's not raining every day. So there's a bunch of different pieces to this. It's certainly confusing, and I can understand that. Obviously, I've gotten a lot more education in this than I'm sure that the average citizen has, and I'm not, because we do have to learn all these things. So I'm not sure if that answers most of your questions. We certainly have plenty of people here. I mean, the first conversation we're having is about for right-of-way and easements. It's for main discussion, I believe, was putting sheds and what we wanted to, if we wanted to allow sheds in the easement. We'll also have the right-of-way discussion as well. But I'm hoping that answers most of your questions. If not, just let me know.
So what is the difference between a right-of-way and an easement? Because I think they're used interchangeably when it comes to the front, especially the front.
Yes.
But easements, help me understand the difference between right-of-way and easement.
I could look one up, maybe. Your staff might be able to help. Quick,
I
easier than
can
that.
try to explain. I don't have the full legal explanation, but a right-of-way, generally speaking, is an easement. There are different ways that a city can get a right-of-way, and some are when we have it in fee simple ownership, and then others are when we have it prescribed by an easement. But a right-of-way So a right-of-way can refer to two different types, but generally speaking, they are easements within the city. And it really depends on how the plat was created. But yes, they are, sorry, for the record, Nicole Gillis, forgot about that part. But yes, they are easements most of the time.
So right-of-way and easements are used interchangeably. Right-of-way mostly is used for the front part of the property. Easements are for the sides and back,
A right-of-way is a type of easement.
okay?
Gives you the right of way.
Yeah, so they can't necessarily be used interchangeably because an easement doesn't always refer to a right-of-way. Yeah.
Because I didn't see right-of-way easements in the list of all the different easements in the backup material, so that's why I'm asking the question.
If I may help Nicole just a little bit. For the record, Juliana Belia, Public Works Director. In the city of Northport, the original developer, General Development Corporation, they created subdivision plats and plans. And in these subdivision plat, they platted drainage and utility easements, and they platted public right-of-ways. The right-of-ways generally in the city of Northport refer to two things: road right-of-ways for roadways, and also your drainage right-of-ways. And we have drainage right-of-ways all over the city as part of our open swale drainage system. So for example, we'll start with the road. When you have a road, you'll have a right-of-way. And then you'll have a single-family lot, for example, and you'll have on either side of that property, you'll have two 6-foot easements, drainage and utility easements. That allows grants automatically permissions for drainage and utility companies such as Road and Drainage, Florida Power and Light, Comcast, all those utility companies to come in and place their infrastructure in there, as well as conduct their work. On the back of a standard lot, you'll have typically a 10-foot wide drainage and utility easement for the same purpose. On waterway lots and on lots that abut retention ditches, what we commonly refer to as R ditches, you'll typically have a 20-foot wide drainage right-of-way. That is a platted right-of-way area that you'll have that's adjacent to a waterway or the R ditch. Within that, and this is where it gets a little confusing, within that 20-foot area, you'll have a 10-foot drainage and utility easement for the typical users such as Comcast and all that. The benefits of expanding it to 20 on the waterways is for my department, so they can get in there and conduct their work and maintenance work. So hopefully I helped a little bit.
Yeah.
I have a question to add to that, if I may. Ms. Julie, I noticed when it was talking about that 20-foot and the 10-foot in the rear,
Yes, ma'am.
it talked about going from the property line and then going back 10 foot, or from the property line going back 20 foot. Is there a set distance for the drainage area? Because then you run into the next lot. So I'm just curious.
The drainage can be anywhere within that 20-foot. And typically your right-of-way is an addition. In other words, you can have a right-of-way that can range from 20 feet. You have some that are 50 feet. You have some that are 100 feet, depending on where you're at and what the water body is. But the purpose of the easement is on private property. The easement is, you know what I mean? So, but the drainage, it depends on the contour of the water body of where it's going to be on the property. But usually it goes across the same area of the adjacent lots.
That's why it goes from the property line toward the canal.
Yes, ma'am.
Or swale
That is
or
correct.
whatever, the drainage area.
Yes, ma'am, that's
Okay.
correct.
Thank you.
So if you have a 10-foot utility easement, and I'm talking about in the rear.
On the standard lot, no waterway?
And that's what I'm, okay, so
Okay.
it's a 10-foot utility and drainage easement.
Yes, ma'am.
In the back of the property.
Yes, ma'am.
And then if you are on a canal or some kind of a drainage ditch or anything like that, then there's another 20-foot.
Not another, a total of 20 feet.
Okay, that's
Yes,
where
ma'am.
I need to get
Yes,
that
ma'am.
clarification, because I'm looking at, so you're saying it's, if you're on a waterway, you only have a maximum of 20 feet. It's not 10 for utility, and then another 20 for
No,
drainage.
that's correct. What I was explaining was, it's a little trickish on the way some of the plat wording is, but on a waterway or on a retention ditch, it's gonna be a 20-foot easement, 20-foot wide easement on private property. In addition to that, from the property line where it ends, in the back, you may have along a waterway, a drainage right-of-way or a 20 feet, 50 feet, sometimes it's 100 feet. So it gets very confusing the way it's worded. In addition to that, sometimes on the plat, it will state that 10 feet of that within the 20-foot easement are for your typical users such as Comcast, Verizon, different folks like that. It's just very confusing the way it's worded, but that's how it is worded. And then the whole 20 feet, the remainder, the reason for the 20 feet is for drainage, for us to get in there and do our work.
So it's a total of 20 feet utility and drainage.
Yes, ma'am.
And maintenance if
Yes,
you're on a
ma'am,
canal.
total, yeah. Typically, the first 10 feet closest to the rear of the property line is where most of your other users other than road and drainage put their infrastructure in there.
Okay.
Typically.
So-
I'm not saying always, but typically.
Part of my question then goes on to a more of a personal level, because when we asked about placement of a shed, I was told it's 10 plus 20, which makes it a total of 30. So there seems to be a little bit of a disconnect between what one department says and another department says. So that's where I think a lot of this confusion comes into play as far as some differences.
It's, like I said, it's possible that when, and I don't know, it's the 10 feet within the 20 feet. Maybe there was I don't know, in explaining how the whole 20 foot is broken up.
Okay.
But it's a total of 20.
Okay, so
Yes,
it is a
ma'am.
total of 20 if
Yes,
you're on a
ma'am.
drainage canal. It's
Yes,
only a
ma'am.
10 if you are not on a drainage canal.
That is correct.
Gotcha.
Or if you're on what's called an R ditch, then a lot of times it's also going to be 20. Yes,
Okay.
ma'am. And that could also be on the side. So if you have an R ditch on your side,
Right.
it could also be 20 as well.
Gotcha.
Yes, ma'am.
So then the 6-foot easement, so you have your property line, and then on the sides, you have 6 foot from your property line towards your house as an easement.
Yes, ma'am.
And then your neighbor has a property line, same spot, and then 6 foot towards their property. So you have a total of 12 foot in between the two, with the center line being your property line.
That,
So it's
yes,
a
ma'am.
total of
Yes, ma'am.
12 feet.
You're correct.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. You're correct. You're
Gotcha.
correct.
So there's no front easements, it's only a right-of-way.
That is correct.
Okay.
It's a road right away, public road right away.
All right.
Can I ask one more question, just make sure I clarify? If you go back in time, basically, all of the property lines were designed, platted, whatever you
Yes,
want to
ma'am.
call.
That's correct.
And then those easements, which include right-of-ways, were overlaid over that, correct?
It was all laid out on the subdivision plat and plans. Yes, ma'am.
So
Yes, ma'am.
all those easements lie on top of properties, correct?
Yes, ma'am. And in
That
a
are
plat
owned
unit,
by whoever.
yes, ma'am. And in every single plat, you have what's called a certificate of ownership and dedication, and they explain, and sometimes they're different, but typically that's what they are. They get a little trickish with the waterway ones or the side outfall easements, but generally that's the general rule of thumb that I explained.
Okay, that's easy and clear to understand when you realize property lines are first and then easements, overlay over it.
Yes, ma'am.
And
That's correct.
Okay,
It's
thank you.
just granting access and maintenance responsibility and allowing your drainage and utility companies to install their infrastructure and maintain their infrastructure. That's the purpose of the easements.
I'm sure that's set by Florida statute.
Yes, ma'am, Chapter 177, the subdivision plat requirements for Florida State. And then, of course, we have our own Unified Land Development Code regulations as well.
Thank you.
Are all of the outside of CDD districts? So we have like the estates, then we have like the older section of town, then we have like the east end of town, and then the center part of town. Are they all platted with the same width of easements and right-of-ways identically, or is there some
recently
possible?
wider? Are they still 6 and 10?
We'd have to go back and double check the land development code. I've been away from that for several years as far as whenever I used to be a planner, but we'd have to verify if the newer subdivisions, if those easement widths have changed. I'm just giving you the numbers that I'm familiar with.
So the newer subdivisions, give me an example what area that might be.
So, I mean, like out in the West Villages, the plats are definitely different out there.
Oh, yeah,
I can tell you that's
it's
a
a
whole nother-
CDD, it's a whole different animal, I get that.
Yeah, but within any other of the general development plats.
All the general development ones
Yeah,
would
I
be the
believe
same.
they are,
Yeah.
okay, the same, yeah.
That would be the same?
Yes.
Right, okay.
Gotcha. I didn't see, and I may have missed it, in the fee schedule, what it costs to vacate an easement.
I can find it for you pretty quickly.
And then my next question as a follow-up to that same is about how long does it take from the time that you find out you have to vacate to the time that it's actually complete? And I understand that it depends on commission meetings, and I get that, but in general, rule of thumb.
Yes. Rule of thumb, it probably takes about 3 months from the time of the application to when it has to be prepared and go to planning board, as well as the required advertisement. Per the Florida statutes, the applicant is to advertise twice, so that, and then getting the staff report, it goes to planning board for 1 meeting, and then commission for 1 meeting, and then it's adopted by resolution. Within that time period of the resolution being written, it's reviewed by the city attorney as to form and correctness. So there is a lot that goes into that. So approximately 3 months.
Were you able to find the cost?
Right here.
Application. It varies based on acreage of the site. So 4 acres or less is $825. 5 acres to 50 acres is $1125, and over 50 acres is $1425. The most common we see is the 825.
That's all the questions I have, Mayor.
Okay. Ms. Lake, do you have anything?
In line with the vacation of easement, there's also the relocation of easement. To me, it's just, and I know Mayor Hanks, I believe, went through this, purchasing property, and the easement doesn't automatically move to then the border. You still have easement down the center of the property, so when you try to build or construct, you have to go through another step. Is that state mandated that you do that, or can we set something so that automatically when properties are purchased, it sends those easements to the border?
This goes back to the original plats from general development. Some of them have language in them that automatically reverts those easements to the outside when a home is being built in the middle. Yeah, some don't. So it's just the original plat language on them. Some of them have it, some of them don't.
So an individual has to come in and find out how, their plat reads?
Correct.
I bet you most people don't realize that. And so thusly, they think by purchasing in that, is there a way we can simplify that for everybody?
You'd have to replat, I believe. You'd have to change the
Yeah,
lot
which
language.
becomes very expensive from what I understand.
Yeah, and then if you ever decide that you want, let's say your
Oh, you
house
want
is
to
on
redivide it
one,
back,
and
yeah.
then you have your next door neighbor, and you want to move those easements to the side, but then at some point you want to sell that, I don't think then you can. Can you then,
You have to then re-subdivide it.
Yeah.
You would have to replat them, which
I bought
then,
4 lots around my house. I may not want them to automatically move to the edge.
because I might, because
I'm
that's
gonna
what
sell them
you're.
off at some point. I just bought them because I don't want neighbors, and then when I go to sell my house, the next person might not care if they have neighbors.
Thank you. That helps me. I mean, appreciate it. Appreciate the conversation. Not at this point, thank you.
Okay, well, part of the reason why we're here is to talk about sheds. We can get kind of two of that, Vice Mayor, and it sounded like you're.
yeah, I have, so in the utility easement, I saw in the code, it says wells cannot be in the utility easement, because that's a solid structure in an easement. However, I live in an area where my entire block, every single one of us, has our well in our easement.
I can't speak to that. We did confirm with the health department that they would not approve a well in an easement. So I without seeing the actual survey, I can't really speak to what happened there, but
So if my area, I hope I'm unique, but I am willing to bet that I am not, what happens with somebody that does have a well in an easement now? Do they have to pay to vacate it when it was approved by the city and inspected and everything was done?
Julie's gonna come help me on this.
For the record, Juliana Belia, Public Works Director. Those are, the septic tank and wells are permitted by the Sarasota County Health Department. Whenever I used to do it many years ago, they did not allow it, not to say that in possibly some cases there was a reason they did. And generally, for example, on a water body, there is distance requirements from the water body that they have to be set back from. But that being said, the city of Northport, we do not regulate the locations of the wells or septic tanks. That is all done by the state through Sarasota County Health Department. So unfortunately, I do not know why they would have allowed them in some areas of the city. But as a general rule of thumb is they do not.
Sure, I'm going to be expecting a nasty gram then in the next 30 days now that I made that publicly knowledgeable. But then all will my neighbors and everybody else in the city. How is that going to be addressed?
That's something we're gonna have to figure out. I can't answer that right now at the meeting.
Probably what we could do, Vice Mayor, is we could check into it, get with Sarasota County Health Department and find out maybe there's a reason why that was done, and then get back to the commission on that. Perhaps there's a viable explanation.
Okay. All righty. Well, obviously, if we can't have a well in an easement, and that makes sense, that you can't have a shed. I was looking at it as the well was approved in an easement, so that can't move regardless.
Right.
So then why couldn't you put in a shed? So, and put it in the easement. But I understand now the well isn't supposed to be in the easement either.
That's correct.
Yeah, it would just be compounding by allowing more things than that.
So is the well being in the easement, is it only for utility easement, or is it also the drainage easement? That it can't be in any easements?
No easement. Yes, ma'am. It should not be in any easement.
Personally, I don't have a problem with the way that it is right now, keeping the sheds back off of the easement.
Yeah, the whole conversation started with wells are allowed in the easement, allowed, and I say that in quotes, only to find out that there was errors. So, thank you.
So it sounds like to me that we have a direction from the commission to leave things as is concerning the sheds, the wells. I mean, if it's not supposed to be there, it's not supposed to be there.
Yeah.
We'll find out, like you said, about why or how the wells were allowed to be put there.
I appreciate the conversation and the work that staff,
Because they're already existing too, so I don't think that any action may need to be taken on them from past installations.
would agree with that statement. But staff did a great job bringing things, answering questions. This helps us, not just today on this topic, but for the future when these things come up. So really appreciate the information and the opportunity to learn from you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I do appreciate it.
Okay, we're going to move on. Item B then. Rearranging or not changing the
But does
ordinance.
city manager need consensus to bring back information about the wells that are currently located in the easements that?
We're going to get that
Yeah,
anyway.
he agreed to that anyways.
If for no other reason, if they're not allowed to be there, we now are aware of a problem, we have to address it, or find out if it's an actual problem. So we can't just let it go. So we need to know, like was just mentioned, it could be a grandfathering, it could be an old rule. I don't know all the details of that, so we kind of have to find it out to make sure that we're doing things the right way. We need to either fix or allow the situation to stay the way it is.
Thing that comes to my head is there are rules of how far apart drain fields and septics and things like that are, that maybe it had to go in there because of the distance.
Yep. All right, we're going to move on to item B, Northport Neighborhood Revitalization Plan Implementation Strategy for this workshop. City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, Mr. Miles makes his way up here. This is an item that's, the city received a grant many years ago for neighborhood revitalization. That grant was presented. I think you all may have just come on commission when that was first presented, at least some of you. We've had some information back and forth. There's been some departments reviewing it to see what could we do to help revitalize based on that grant. But with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Miles so he can go through what we have for you today.
Thank you, City Manager. For the record, Frank Miles, Director of Neighborhood Development Services. Item 19-0233 is a discussion and a presentation on the Northport Technical Assistance Grant that was received by the city back in 2017. This grant analyzed 5 neighborhoods in what is considered old or original Northport. They are the original parts of the community. The city retained a consultant, Mr. Jason Green, who conducted the research and analysis of these neighborhoods and created a document to provide his findings. This document identified multiple issues within these neighborhoods and provided suggested strategies to address them. The report detailing the issues and these suggested strategies were then circulated among city departments and divisions, and we were instructed by city management to take that information under advisement and to potentially incorporate some of those items into the city's budgeting process and provide feedback on programs that are underway. The objective today is to obtain commission inputs on direction, priorities, and recommendations on a way forward for these actionable issues. Staff is also looking for discussion on current citywide neighborhood maps that have been previously adopted in our comprehensive plan and determine if there are other actions to undertake with respect to those areas. There was previous direction 2 years ago at a commission meeting to invite residents in these areas to a workshop. This was overlooked. But what would be a potential another approach is to obtain input and direction here today, then provide that feedback to residents in those areas in public community meeting or meetings or a commission setting if that is what the commission desires. We have staff here today available to lead the discussion. We have a short presentation. Ms. Nicole Galehouse, who's our planning manager, Josh Pelfrey, one of our planners who helped us pull a lot of this together, and Mr. Jason Green, who is the original consultant on the neighborhood planning document. Mr. Green has agreed to participate and be here today at no cost, but he has agreed to provide his input and information to the commission as this item is discussed. So with that, I'll turn it over to Ms. Galehouse.
Good morning again. For the record, Nicole Galehouse, Planning Manager. So today our goal is to basically just go over the revitalization strategies and department goals. We've identified which ones are already in progress, what's already being worked on, and the timeframes and potential budgetary considerations for some of the other goals to try to get commission feedback, as Frank mentioned, to prioritize these and potentially include them as budget items. The other part of it is we do want to discuss the neighborhood maps and see if there's any direction from commission on how to move forward with how we're identifying our neighborhoods. So the original grant neighborhoods are shown on the screen here. It was Biscayne Gardens, Hyde Park, Fabian, Spearman, and Highland Ridge. So we looked at these neighborhoods and how they were functioning and different things that were happening in the neighborhoods. And these are the strategies that came out of that final report from the grant that we received. So as you can see, there are, I think, 10 that are current and ongoing programs. So we can certainly look at these and see if there's ways we can ramp these programs up. And then there's some that we could identify to address fairly quickly, and others that would be more long-term goals. So we have this set up kind of by department to go through. So I just kind of wanted to use the slides to kind of guide the conversation and see within each department, what commission would like to see, or more information and what commission would like to see prioritized out of these strategies. So we have Public Works first, which has 5 strategies. The crosswalks, which is the LAP funding is being pursued for sidewalk gap and pedestrian crosswalk installation. Culvert cleanout, there is a program to clear culvert pipes, and it's my understanding this is currently being done reactive with the goal to move towards a more proactive program. Sidewalk connectivity and ADA compliance, we're looking at sidewalk gaps and being addressed, and these are being addressed, and so all 3 of those are currently ongoing. Neighborhood watch signage, the Public Works can work with the Northport Police Department to develop a template and put signs up in these neighborhoods. This would be roughly $100 each and can be installed by existing staff. And then ADA non-compliance, there's been an assessment on North and South Biscayne and on Pan American. Existing pedestrian crossings will be brought up to standards by the end of fiscal year 2018, and ones that are not ADA compliant will be brought up to standards by the end of fiscal year 19. The remaining areas assessment will be completed by the end of the fiscal year 2018 and anticipated to be brought up to standards by the end of fiscal year 2019. So that's the basics of Public Works. So if we want to talk about Public Works, or if there's another way you want to go through this, we can do that as well. But
What?
I said this is, so if we want to talk about Public Works, or we can go through all of them and then come back, it's up to, go through all of them? Okay. So for police, there's the door-to-door neighborhood watch drive. So this would be recruitment being conducted in the identified neighborhoods with the goal of getting 1 volunteer from each area. Neighborhood watch signage, so this is kind of tying back to the Public Works one about putting signs in the neighborhoods. Alternative communication strategies, so we know digital and social media outreach works very well in the city, but in some of these older neighborhoods, those might not be the best ways to reach them. So looking at the Northport Sun, city-owned signboards, and we'd evaluate the budgetary logistics of direct mailers as well. Sometimes these neighborhoods respond better to actually getting something in the mail.
Can I ask a question on number 1? What is door-to-door neighborhood watch drive?
I believe the goal, and I can call up either someone from police.
I
or-
understand neighborhood watch, you know, you drive around, but I don't know what it means by door to door.
Josh assisted in collecting all of this data for me, so I'm gonna let him answer this.
The idea of the door-to-door neighborhood watch drive was just a recruitment drive. A lot of people in the neighborhood did not realize that there was a neighborhood watch as prevalent as it was. Making people, one, aware that it exists, two, that there's opportunities to participate in it, and three, even how to ask for assistance monitoring things throughout the neighborhood, or what should I say, making them aware that you're a snowbird and you would like your house additionally watched, those sorts of things.
Communication and,
Yeah,
okay.
so recruitment drive.
All right, appreciate it, thank you.
Can I just piggyback off that?
Yeah.
Can we just use the North Report and social media for something like that? I mean, we're already doing the report quarterly. It would be a great way. It's going to everybody's home.
It does, but when you're looking to actually improve neighborhood watch, do a targeted drive for a specific area, sometimes it's better to send people out door to door. Nothing against the North Report, but it does come out quarterly, and if there's an area that you want to try to improve quickly, or sometimes make a targeted drive, it is better to go door to door.
So for utilities, one of the suggestions from the report was to look at interior plumbing. Some of the infrastructure from these areas were constructed back in the 1960s, so aging pipe and facilities may have leaks. There's also the potential for these residences to save money on bills if they have these leaks replaced and can improve their aging plumbing. This area is not known for high water bills, so it's unsure how much actual leaking is taking place. The Utilities Department agrees that this should be looked at, but the utilities responsibility is only up to the water meter, not inside the actual home. So it presents some challenges as far as how much we can actually do within that goal. Another recommendation was plumbing insurance. So recommending purchase of insurance plan for on-site plumbing. Utilities customers frequently receive these advertisements. It may be a costly alternative and may never be needed. It's unclear if any on-site inspection must be passed to obtain this insurance, but this is really more of a private homeowner matter, so the city does not recommend endorsing or recommending any specific type of insurance for this, but those insurance plans are available to residents. Pipe inspections, this is current and ongoing, so for asbestos concrete pipes have been used extensively in potable water distribution systems and have an approximate lifespan of 70 years. So these areas have no plan for replacement in the 10-year plan, but they do a test for asbestos every 5 years as required where these pipes are installed. And then a housing corporation, so Northport Utilities supports the final neighborhood report findings that recommended helping residents by setting up a housing corporation or applying for CDBG funds, or alternatively setting up a tax increment financing district to include these properties. For parks and recreation, there are sidewalk gaps, and I think this ties back to, it may tie back to the public works initiatives, but this is current and ongoing, evaluating the sidewalks on the back of Kirk Park along Portobello, continuing the sidewalk in front of Marina Park along Kenwood, and continuing the sidewalk around the perimeter of Highland Ridge Park along Kenwood, Mesa, and Harmony Road. ADA non-compliance, they're proposing an ADA transition plan to be completed beginning in fiscal year 19, and a crosswalk is being recommended to be added at Veterans Park across Biscayne. For fire rescue, they currently conduct home fire safety inspections. So this is ongoing, and they are willing to conduct these, and so this may again be something that's easy to just let people know is available to them. As well as the smoke detector installation and battery. So they have a program to test and install and replace these smoke detectors. The last one is door-to-door inspections. So fire rescue is willing to take a more proactive approach and check entire neighborhoods, ensuring all homes have working smoke detectors. The installation, and then this would tie back to the installation of these. code enforcement, there's coordination with the police department. So the two departments do work together, especially concerning homes that have squatters and drug activity. So, you know, and this goes both ways with code enforcement helping to notify police and police noticing if there's code violations when they do something like a drug bust. With abandoned homes, the code enforcement is handling the registration of abandoned homes and is continuing this program. Lien relief and reduction programs are being utilized as originally set up. The Nice Guys program was a program from several years ago that was utilized. It was not operated within the code enforcement department, I believe, but there was an effort to speak about bringing the Nice Guys program back, but I don't believe that this has led anywhere. The rental home identification, this is probably one of the longer range projects that we would have to undertake. It would be identifying which homes are being used as rentals and monitoring these, having them be registered, and having them inspected possibly annually, but creating such a program is difficult. A lot of cities will utilize water bills to do so, and these neighborhoods may have it, but if it's something you wanted to expand citywide, a lot of the cities not on water. So kind of trying to figure out how to track those is very difficult. So the staff necessary for a program was not available, and the budget was unknown as well. But it's something that we could look into, but it would be a longer range project. For planning and zoning, we could look at neighborhood signs. We know that there's the one out there, I believe, that is in need of repair. And then we could also look at putting these for additional neighborhoods and really helping to create that sense of place. Future land use inconsistencies, so we can look at the future land use map designations and underlying zoning to make sure that the future land use goal can be reached with the available zoning. And if we need to do any rezoning, we can initiate that on a city level. And we are looking at this as we go through the ULDC update as well. And then creation of an overlay district to incentivize acquisition and consolidation of the land to be more appropriate for new development. And this could be included as part of a future city-initiated work program or funded through another branch. So that's pretty much everything until we get into the neighborhood maps. I don't know if you want to talk about all this first and then talk about the maps later, probably. But.
Start you off. A lot of these things, you know, appear to be something that the city tries to address, you know, anyhow. I was part of that meeting that went on over at the Boys and Girls Club. And I think my takeaway was maybe something that others took away from it. And I was expecting something like a road project, that there be this plan set forward and you have step 1, 2, 3, you have a timeline and things like that. And that might not be as easy as a road project because you're hiring somebody else to build the road and we're actually having to do this ourselves. But I think getting back to the people, letting them know, hey, we've addressed this year. We have this next year, you know, within the budget to address, and show them that there is resources being put to this, that there's time being put to this, that this is a project that means a lot to our city. We haven't fallen by the wayside with it. I would like to see a follow-up meeting, you know, after we get ourselves together where we can present to them what this plan is and what we have done. I mean, I personally would like to know what did we do in the past budget year that addressed these things that were sent out to all of the departments. That's a question.
So as mentioned in here, I know a lot of these were being addressed. So like the culvert cleanout program has been working. I'm not sure specifically if it addressed these neighborhoods. I'd have to defer on that one. I know that, as mentioned, we're working on the ADA non-compliance, the crosswalks. I know those are big things that both Public Works and Parks have been addressing.
I know we have feedback that comes from the city manager on projects that go on or directives that we give, and then he responds, and we have this once a month come back to us. I would like to see something for this project. I mean, we got a grant to focus on this, so I'd like to see the achievements that we've done, the things that we have strived for, be tunneled in so that it can be presented as a project, so that we can look at some sort of graph or something or chart and see, yes, this has been achieved, you know, this is down the road or whatever. And then I know we're forming budgets this year. So are the departments that have received this planning on putting things in budget for this revitalization project?
One of the things we're looking for is the input from the commission on the thoughts, because departments want to evaluate these. The ones that are obviously ongoing, yes, they're included in the budget. Some of the ideas, departments will make recommendations, but if there's something that's coming through there that the department recommended for revitalization, commission says no, we'd probably more so look, oh, no, we don't want that. Or if there's the 1 to 5 year program, like some of them mentioned, if you want that sooner rather than later, we'd like to have that input as well.
Well, the presentation was given to us basically telling us that it was handed to the departments and they're scheduling these things. There's not an overlay for us when something comes before us on the dais during budget time to know that this is for the revitalization project. And we might have more of a heart toward making sure that it stays, you may have more of a heart making sure it stays within the budget because this is the revitalization project. So I think drawing it together a little more so that we can see it and feel it would go a long way toward this outcome of this project.
And I'll make sure that when the SLAs are done to the budget, that in the description, if it's related to the revitalization program, that it mentions that in there.
Yeah, I think that would be perfect. And I think then relaying that to these neighborhoods. I mean, Pete lives in one of these neighborhoods, and I'm sure he has people hit him all the time about these things. So, you know, a follow-up, once we have our ducks in a row, a follow-up with them to let them know. And you might want to go neighborhood by neighborhood, not all 5 of them at one time. You might want that special, you know, attention given to each neighborhood, one at a time.
Well, and just add on to that too, each neighborhood may have different needs too.
Exactly.
So you can find out what they prioritize on and work towards their goals for their each individual neighborhood, because I got something coming up under planning and zoning for my neighborhood, so.
Jason was beat up in that meeting with all 5 neighborhoods. And Jason, I appreciate what you do for us. I truly do.
Well, can I speak, if I don't mind, just to give 2 cents? I appreciate your comment you just made. I think that tying together was a critical part. You got to remember, this was the opportunities and constraints phase as far as the grant was. It was really to identify those things that are needed. And while you may have been doing those activities, you weren't necessarily doing them in these neighborhoods. So that's a critical part, is the budgeting part. We could only take, us personally as a consultant, could only take it to the, hopefully opening some eyes, getting the feedback from the community, and then you folks have to do the actual budgeting or shifting of priorities. So if you don't have additional funds available, then you've got to decide which neighborhood gets it versus another, and that's a tough choice. We can't make those choices for you, obviously, and there's so many departments involved in this. It's good to see all the departments coming together, and I think that was kind of a missing piece when we started, was everybody was kind of interested in what was going on, but doing their own thing. And I think through the leadership of administration, they've probably pulled all that together. So it's really, I guess, heartwarming to see. And those people care. They are passionate about their communities. Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't call it getting beat up. I think it was one of the more enjoyable, frankly, strange to say. I do. Enjoyable.
You are politically correct.
Enjoyable outreach programs and to see the turnout. And again, that was direct mailing. That's why they turned out. I think we had 100 people total at some point come through there. So it was a great event and great participation.
I'll pass.
Yeah, I appreciate the information. I attended that meeting at the Boys and Girls Club, and yeah, you got beat up because you were the spokesman. But in essence, it opened up my eyes. I was a new commissioner when that meeting took place, and the disconnect between the city and the citizens was very loud and clear. That they felt like they were neglected. But now that I've been a commissioner for a few years, I see a need citywide, not just in these few neighborhoods, but I see like Country Club Ridge or other areas that don't fit into this map that have the same, I can't say the same, have similar issues that these 5 areas have. And I'd like to see it be focused more, not just on the older part of town or wiser part of town, but citywide. But citywide, because it becomes a domino effect. When one home or 2 or 3 in a small area, then it just becomes this domino and affects the entire neighborhood. I'd like to see things done citywide, maybe focusing on those 5 neighborhoods to kind of get them caught up. But we cannot forget about the rest of the city, because you're going to fix one, and then this is going to fall, and then that's going to fall.
If I may, I think part of the discussion when we originally talked about this is using these neighborhoods almost as a pilot program. Right. So you try it here first, see how it works, and then expand it citywide.
But we can't have a pilot program that lasts 2 years. These other neighborhoods that are then, well, I'm not in there, why, and I'm paying taxes, and I'm not getting attention, and we have the same issues, similar issues. When I attended the meeting, the biggest thing I heard was the disconnect between code enforcement, because we have codes that address a lot of the blight in the areas, and also police presence. Those were the 2 main things I heard over and over and over again. And I don't know what can be done about that, but I think that we need to do something a little bit more present. Definitely love the idea of a community conversation. We really do need to have one. And I think maybe we need to, like we did with the town hall that we had for West Villages, we need to do those for the West Villages. We need to do it in the older part of town. We need to do it in the central part of town. We need to do it for the Heron Creek, in the east end of town, and the estates, because each one of these neighborhoods, the geographical area, has specific concerns. And I'd like to see a program where we could also start to implement maybe not what we call the Nice Guy program, but something similar to that, where the community helps spruce up the community and get together, maybe paint a house or put some gardening in or clean out the swales, or, you know, just a community effort to help improve the community. We get a lot of businesses, we used to do it in the old days, where you get the businesses to donate the paint, you get the businesses to donate the flowers, and you know, and it makes things look better in that neighborhood. And speaking of Country Club Ridge, when is that sign going back up? It's been almost 6 months since the sign got taken out by the car. I'm sure the insurance is already paid. I'd appreciate that. So that's where I'm thinking about. I have a couple of specific questions about the thing, but I just kind of wanted to get where my thoughts were on this whole concept.
Mr. Image?
I got some other questions not pertaining to exactly what they're talking about, but she sort of touched on it. It has to do with planning and zoning and what they've proposed here. Neighborhood signs. Okay, right here. Assist in creating a sense of place and identity, more specifically neighborhood signage. Well, I live in Highland Ridge, it's not a secret, but when I left the city 5 years ago, that area where there was a Highland Ridge sign was maintained by property maintenance. When I left, the director and his staff decided to abandon that area completely. Did not cut the grass on city property, did not maintain the signs, and did not maintain the planting area where it says, "Welcome to Highland Ridge." For 5 years now, it has been deteriorating and it has been maintained by neighborhood individuals. Now it's city property. You're talking about bringing in neighborhood signage. That right there is one that needed to be replaced. Now through our group, we have reached out to a few individuals that have offered to help replace that sign. I had meetings with Mr. Lear when I was campaigning. We had discussed it. But I still feel that it is up to the city to take care of their own property and replace it. They have come with answers from the old building department director saying that, oh, once it comes down, we can't put another one up. Which, well, it's city property. It's a designation to that area. It's right on the four corners of Northport Boulevard and Biscayne. To have traffic stop there and look and see city property in disarray is very unheartening. And it's been going on for 5 years. So I just want to put that out there and let you know that people are complaining. We got people out there that may just go up and stain it right now just to get it looking good. We've put plants up there, we've cleaned it up. But if you drive by there, it's right in front of where the Boys and Girls Club is. We maintain Highland Ridge Park. It took us 15 minutes to go up there and straighten up that area whenever we were maintaining Highland Ridge Park. So it wasn't an extra trip out there just to take care of the sign. It was incorporated into that whole area being done. So.
For the record, Juliana Belia, Public Works Director. If I may, I will check and find out where we are at in the process for the country, or the, yes, Country Club Ridge. Well, I was gonna start with the Country Club Ridge to find out where that is in the replacement, but we're waiting on the insurance money, and then we're gonna use that money to purchase the new sign, so I'll find out where the new signage is in the process. Secondly, for Highland Ridge, and the reason to go back to how we obtained the ownership of the actual Country Club Ridge sign is when the 4-laning of Sumter Boulevard was done. At that time, the engineering department at the time, which was separate from Public Works, they included in the plan to replace that sign, which was taken down. So that's how we secured that ownership. Because prior to that, the original sign was constructed by General Development Corporation. So working that way up toward Highland Ridge, that, of course, that sign was a sign constructed by General Development Corporation. And you're absolutely correct on City of Northport property. Prior to that, the Property Maintenance Division was part of the Neighborhood Development Services Department. I agree. I think that now, and our department has it now, Public Works. We now have property maintenance for all the grounds and facilities under Public Works. I would propose that we should clean that area up and maintain it. As far as the replacement of the sign, I will have to get with the city manager, of course, and the assistant city manager to get their direction on that. But I agree, that should be maintained by the city, that landscaping.
Well, and also if you go down Sumter where the sign is for Country Club Ridge, that's still being maintained by the contractor that does Sumter. It's not like their people from their development go out there and maintain it. So how is it
yes,
not
sir. Yes, sir.
fair
No, yes,
for
sir.
each development?
You're correct. I agree with you. I agree with you.
I just want to get it out there to where we can get some resolution and get this taken care of.
Yes, sir.
Piggybacking on that, city manager, how many signs does the city own that are similar to the Highland Ridge and the Country Club Ridge signs throughout the city, similar to those kind of monument type signs for the neighborhoods?
Can I add to that, not only just the signs, but the land around it? I'm curious.
Okay, is that something you could get for us? Because I know this is not going to be one conversation and done. I know this is going to be one of many. But I think having that information about the signage, especially coming for budget time, so that way then we can unify the type of signs, what they look like. Since we gotta do Country Club Ridge, we're gonna do Highland Ridge, how many others are out there? So that way then they could kind of have a Northport neighborhood feel to them, be more uniformish. And possibly put something in the budget for that, because there's other areas I know that have the signs, I just don't know how many there are.
Well, we used to maintain the Jockey Club sign right off of this.
Correct.
There's a sign in Marius Park, I believe there's a sign in Hyde Park. They're smaller.
Exactly, I just would like to know how many
But
signs
they're
we
throughout the
have.
city, yes.
I understand that as the city developed and grew, there was those original, where all the signs were of those neighborhoods. That is something that was bequeathed to us. I mean, to me, we may have changed, and we've got CDDs and we got HOAs, and they have their signage and they take care of it and stuff. But still, we're in charge of caring for what was given to us. That's my opinion. And so I understand, well, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. You can't do for that one and not do for this one. But when you think of the history of it, that is ours to maintain, because that's what came to us. These others came later and they were not given to us. It is their responsibility. But personally, myself, I feel as though we have the responsibility to take care of the history and the heritage of our city, which includes those original developments with the signage.
So in answer to your question, yes, we will get you the number of signs, what kind of status they are. I believe this is one of the benefits of why we moved property maintenance to Public Works. They're in different areas and have different mindsets. And I think that it will help improve the maintenance of these signs, as well as, you know, the ongoing beautification of the whole city. So,
And when it comes to my area, we do have individuals over there that will volunteer their time and help with this process too, so it can be community/city. We're not just putting it on the city, we'd love to help.
no, and I agree with that. That goes back to the statement earlier of getting community involvement, getting organizations, and so that we can
Go on to it because they might get hurt. That was city property. So that's where
if the city organizes the event, then it eliminates that ability. And
Can you get us maybe a map of where these signs are, and maybe like what kind, are they monument sign, big monument sign, little monument sign, is it a street sign? You know, what kind of signage there is for these different neighborhoods?
Yes.
Because I know there's a whole bunch of different ones.
Not all the same.
If I can also mention, possibly we'll include in that information, is whether or not they're in the city right-of-way versus on
Perfect.
private property.
Perfect.
Because, for example, most of your older General Development Corporation signs were all put in the right-of-way or on our city property, whereas the newer subdivisions you're going to find are put on private property.
Perfect.
So that could be a
Excellent.
distinguishing factor.
yes.
Yes, good point.
So part of what we're supposed to be doing is giving specific strategies and a direction. So this is one. So we have a specific strategy and direction. It looks like it goes across the board here for the signage and the taking care of these areas. So that's one of those areas. All right, moving on. Anything else?
I got one more, and I just wanted to add on with what Commissioner McDowell or Vice Mayor McDowell was saying about the Nice Guys program. It was underneath the Sherry Board stuff in the beginning, but it was a group of city employees. I was one of them. We all got together, we got donations from all sorts of different businesses throughout town, and we coordinated it through, I believe, social services, and found out that there was a couple dire individuals out there that needed help. So we went and we did that. We repainted, re-landscaped, cleaned up the house, and we did it as a group of volunteers. Nothing was done on city time or taxpayers' dime. But we went out there, and it gave us a camaraderie to where we were helping the community. We had all of the, like, I was in landscaping, so I helped design that. You had, you know, inspectors that knew electrical or whatever that needed to be done. We had the professionals out there to do that. And what also it did was it got the group of the city employees together to where you may not have known Joe Blow or Jim Bob or whoever, but you met everybody, and it grew us together. I'm not saying it's something that needs to be imposed, But I think it should be an option if somebody would like to put a group together of city employees and volunteer and do that. That's how I would suggest revitalizing this program, because we did get a lot out of it. I think the one lady that we helped was 81 years old, and she was wheelchair bound. She couldn't do much, and she was all on her own. So we went in, and I think we did a Saturday and a Sunday over there. And it was rewarding to us to be able to do that. We can bring our wives, our kids. We had little lunches out there, and everybody just gave, and it was a good day. But to go with what the vice mayor was saying, working with the community together is something neat too. So I would just like to see it thought of, and let the employees decide if that's something that they want to do.
Absolutely.
Can I ask, Mayor, you brought an organization here that does stuff. They were based out of Venice. What was their name?
Surf Florida,
Surf Florida,
we've
yeah.
already done some great
Yeah.
things with them that kind of do some of
Would
that.
they take on a project like this?
I think they just work with the city on the things that they do, yeah. Yeah, I think we just get with them, and Pete knows, you know, there's an app, there's all kinds of things that.
Yeah, we work with them for cleaning up one of our potential parks, I believe the disc golf park that's coming up.
Hall.
So even if some city employees would like to jump on that bandwagon and team up, that would be awesome.
Even if you did it twice a year or something, you know? Yeah.
Yep, and that organization was, based on what they described and what we actually used them for the one time already, would be more, my guess, would be more like the, working together for the signs, the neighborhood signs, is what they were looking for is, we provide all of the supplies and they provide basically the labor and go do some of the cleanup of these kind of things, as opposed, and I'm not saying they couldn't do something like the Nice Guys program, because yes, we're involved in that years ago. That was more finding a specific individual as opposed to city property. And I don't, in my own head, I'm very clear on what the distinction is, and I'm not sure if I'm making it clear to you all or not, but, the Nice Guys program, we picked a couple houses. One, there was landscaping, there was some painting work done that helped an individual, like you mentioned, that's unable to help themselves do these kind of things. You don't want somebody wheelchair bound out there doing landscaping work and painting. So
How that was determined, how that one individual got picked versus
The
25,000?
It was through social services, and you can apply and say that you had the need, and then I believe Zuma was the one that came down and said, these are the most needy, and then it was brought to our board, and we looked through it, and we said, okay, we want to help these ones, and then, we ranked them 1, 2, 3, 4, and then moved on.
So there was a criteria?
There was a process.
Okay, there was a process, because.
handled under general services at the time.
Yeah, and I'm not saying
There
code
has to-
enforcement needs to be the one to oversee this, because we're not out there trying to fix up houses that are being dinged all the time for violations. We wanted to help somebody that was in desperate need, and that's why we did it.
Definite difference between those two.
Exactly,
There is,
exactly.
you know.
Exactly, that's why I was asking if there was a process. Do you think you could bring us more information on that process for, and I'm only referring to it as Good Guys because I think we all understand what that is. And the Serve America, Serve Florida. And see if maybe teaming up and doing this twice a year to do something in the neighborhoods?
Through social service?
Yeah.
The second one of those certainly will be easier because we just recently did it, the Nice Guy program. There are very few people left here that were involved in it the first time. I'll see what we can resurrect. As far as the criteria that was used and everything, my involvement was long after I was nowhere near any of the positions I've been in for the last 8 years when we did that. So I don't know what the criteria was. We'll have to do some research and see if we can find out how that was evaluated.
That's all right. Titles don't matter. You can still volunteer.
No, it wasn't the volunteering. It was how we got to the point. The volunteering is the easy part. As far as, it was, you showed up, somebody told you what to do, and you did it. The getting to that point is the part that I was not involved in.
Yeah, because I think
Right.
we need to have a little bit more information on this Serve Florida, what their parameters are, what is required for us as a city. I know we did it for the disc golf, but is it only on city property, or will they help with private property? That I don't know. is the good guys only on private property or is it only on city? You know, so I think we need to understand the differences or maybe working together.
Yeah, so the Nice Guy program we had, we completely controlled it. That was city volunteers, or city employees volunteering their time on a weekend. The individuals were picked, like I said, I don't know the criteria, but that, you know, could easily have turned into a city property, and we do the cleanup day where people, you know, citizens and employees come and volunteer, and they're assigned a certain roadway, and they go and they just pick up, you know, trash, all that area. So the Nice Guys program could be either. The Serve Florida has the one time we did it, been on city property. We'll get with them and find out their willingness of where they would be willing to do programs. But the vision in my head would be, again, like I said, them more for the signs, that type of an event, and then the Nice Guys would be more for specific, you know, they're being nice guys.
So while we're on the subject of cleaning up the neighborhoods, litter and illegal dumping is prolific throughout the city. And I know we have a Clean Up Northport coming up sometime this month. We only do it once a year.
Twice a year.
It's twice a year that we do it.
I was unfamiliar. Maybe for our next conversation, information about this illegal dumping too, because it just doesn't seem to be getting resolved. And I know as soon as they get one area cleaned up, there's crap put back.
I have a nice couch at the end of my street if you'd like one.
No,
Every time we go for a walk, my wife asks me if you want to take a seat.
You know, it's so hard. So many uninhabited areas to just go
But
dump
that
stuff.
also comes to the blight that everybody
Yeah.
sees, and you know, it just, well, if they don't care, then I don't care, and it becomes that domino. And I think Ms. Julie.
We have 2 citywide cleanups annually. We have the Great American Cleanup in April each year. This will be held on April the 13th from 8 a.m. to noon this year. And we have the International Coastal Cleanup, which is held in September every year. So we do 2 annual cleanups as part of Keep Sarasota County Beautiful.
And that's being advertised for the 13th, so we can get a nice, huge
Yes,
turnout.
ma'am. Mm-hmm. Yes, ma'am.
There was a huge one last time.
Mm-hmm.
Great turnout. I mean, the thing boils down to is how do you change the mindset of the citizens to take pride in who they are?
We have to be the example.
What their city is. I mean, yeah.
And that was part of my goal with the Serve Florida was, it really came out of, for me, the Biscayne mishap that we had. And listen, mistakes were made, whatever, now let's move forward. And I saw, somebody had mentioned on a post, a Facebook post, somebody had mentioned, why don't we get together, go out there and pull some of the weeds? And man, that person got lit up. Are you kidding me? I pay taxes, I do this.
Yeah.
And we're missing the heart behind community. I get it. Your taxpayer dollars were spent. I get it. It messed up. I understand. Sorry. We didn't intend to do that. But it happened. So what can we do to move forward now? And that was exactly my goal with Fabi, with the Serve Florida, was to try to bring that community back together and then change the way we actually view ourselves.
And I think part of changing that mindset is we're the city, we're the example, and we really need to start stepping up too.
Sure.
And helping with the litter and the illegal dumping and the code enforcement and the police presence. I mean, these are all very important little things that they're already paying for through their tax dollars that maybe they're not seeing on a regular basis.
Yeah.
May I, Frank Miles, Director of Neighborhood Development Services, in a prior position that I had up north, we were responsible for managing the environmental and code enforcement functions of an entire county. And what we did was we identified areas that were problem areas, code enforcement issues, etc. A program that we found was very successful, and I believe that it's been tried here in the past, is the county brought in large roll-off dumpsters into these neighborhoods, and it was a free drop off. Residents could clean up their yard, they could put the trash in, no cost, and we hauled all that stuff away. What we found, at least in 2 neighborhoods, was as that increased, people took more care in their homes. They would paint their house, they would plant plants. We targeted that, coupled that with some strategic road improvements, sidewalk installation, etc. But, you know, perhaps we might want to, since we have our own solid waste department, is to allow those particular areas to have trash pickup days or whatever we want to call that.
So Frank, you would zone off the city, and then say you had 3 huge dumpsters, and then throughout the year, those dumpsters would move to those different zones or those different neighborhoods?
Sure.
How would that work? Yeah. All right, so
Yeah.
that's the way, I mean, because I like that
I
idea.
love that idea.
Pretty basic.
Because you still get the 2 normal ones, but this is for the neighborhood, you
It's like
know.
big waste pickup.
Yeah, so they can take the couch at the end of the street.
That's it.
And
Or
instead
off
of
their
it sitting
porch.
on the street or in a vacant lot, they can just take it right
Yeah.
there, you know, 2 or 3 times a year in this specific
Now-
area.
Yes.
Now, I've lived in cities that have, I guess, you know, they have areas where you can take your trash. Yeah, and as long as you're a city resident, you're able to dump it, you know, they have, police officers will patrol that, if you're just passing through and you're throwing your stuff away, you can get in trouble for it, but that's kind of the same idea, just you're moving it to the specific neighborhoods, which I think is a better deal, because then it motivates better.
Absolutely.
I'm not having to go somewhere to dump my trash.
There could be a church within one of those neighborhoods, what we'd worked with, a church, and we were able to bring in
I think that's a great idea.
roll-off, and then we promoted it, and
I think
folks
that's
filled
a
them up.
great idea too, because you're utilizing.
Step toward the transfer stations. I mean, I've had people in the community say, you know, where can I take this, you know, to dump it off? And transfer stations allow that to happen. So this is a great step into bringing a transfer station here.
And I think utilizing, like you said, utilizing some of these nonprofit organizations that's what they do. They immobilize people, you know, to get together and help their neighbors and to do things. I think it's a great idea,
Yeah, I
guys.
think it's really important to bring back the community. We've never lost the community feel, but somehow it's starting to fade a little bit, and I think we need to bring it back to the
Definitely
forefront.
getting aggressive.
And be a little bit more aggressive, be the example, and I'm hopeful that it might start to sway and change people's minds that we really do want to take pride in our community, and we want it to rub off on everybody, and I think that
Chief Titus, you have something? Saw you pop up there.
Scott Titus for the Fire Rescue District. So I'm always reluctant to jump into the middle of a conversation that gives the appearance that I'm not supporting another director and things that go on, because I think the concept and the idea is fantastic. The concern that I have just listening to some of the discussions, unless there's a really, really tight control on who can dump, how can dump, who's there at those sites.
And product you can dump.
Exactly. And so one of the things that I bring up, just the example of, solid waste just had an amazing day where all the people came through, has waste and stuff like that, and it's great. The difficulty with something like this is if somebody's not truly there, and it nearly needs to be 24/7 to monitor that, we advertise it as an opportunity to clean up an area and things like that. You get tires, you get paint, you get chemicals, you get everything else, and literally then to go through each one of those dumpsters, try to separate that material to make it go where it is, I think could be very cost prohibitive. So certainly we're willing to work with anybody to try and help if there's a way to resolve this or a way to do something, but I have some concerns just at the.
So Mr. Miles, how did you guys address that in your?
We had them on specific timeframes. We had actually a lot of the county board members, staff
So like
were
6
there.
hours for a day, or?
We did it for a day, and we promoted it, and we really didn't have that much of a problem with, you know, other kinds of waste. But if we got that kind of waste, we dealt with it, because they made the decision that they wanted to get that stuff cleaned up. So folks in these targeted areas, you know, they may have
And I'll
paint.
tell you, it's
They
better
may-
probably to mix that stuff in a dumpster where it's controlled than it is just toss it off in the woods somewhere.
Right.
This is one of these, it certainly sounds like the commission likes this idea.
I think maybe it has
The
to be
logistics
vetted
of
in
it,
logistics.
Yeah, I mean, that stuff has to be vetted out, and definitely with the fire chief.
Yeah, we would have all the departments, all I know, I can feel my inner Monica Bramble out there saying that, you know, solid waste can't provide the service for free, but it doesn't mean the city can't do it. There's been numerous times where we have our sponsorship program where the general fund reimburses solid waste for the roll-off or whatever. There are ways and logistics that we can figure out, that we don't have to go through all the details here today if this is something.
Solid waste just needs to know this is a loss leader.
That's right. Well, and you
We'll
could
make money on the end.
rotate it the same way as we do like the hazmat day. Let's roll out the dumpster day and just come dump your stuff.
That's it.
And then this way it's maintained. and
There
looked
are
at.
certainly ways, I mean, like I said, there's a lot of logistics.
Yes.
Chief Titus brought up one of them. There are numerous ones that, if it's a program that, from what I'm hearing, you all certainly are supportive of, that's what we'll do, is go figure out the logistics, how to implement it.
Working out the logistics.
We gotta see the
will-
logistics.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've
Yes.
just gotta see
And
the
we'll figure out,
logistics
yeah.
and how this could be implemented.
The fun part.
Yeah.
Just like the Nice Guys program, the fun part that I wasn't involved in last time. Yes.
So you got some pretty easy direction so far today.
So that's a direction. One of the things that I want to do, because we have this strategy timetable, and that's what you're looking for, is direction on strategy, if we want to change this up, if we want to continue with the processes you have. So, so let's get that from the
I would
commission.
like to see us design a project format for this project so that it can be brought to the citizens in a community meeting. No, I'm talking about the neighborhood.
We need to have a community conversation.
The strategy timetable.
Exactly. Well, I think it needs to be a little more defined than what this table is showing, so that we know what I talked about in the very first opening. And he was talking about putting on the SLAs, if this, you know, refers to this, and that way we build a format so that we can take it to the citizens of those neighborhoods in a meeting and say, this is our plan. This is our strategy.
Into the map. Oh, was that what you were going to kind of talk about, or?
No, the maps is a little different, more talking about communities and how
Oh,
they're.
okay.
I mean, we ended up, you know, after the work that was gone into it, we ended up with these suggestions. And it's like, now you formulate the strategy, the plan, so that it can be presented. You just don't have it hanging there. And we were told in this that it went to the various departments to see how they could implement it. And so just bringing back the conclusion of how they feel they can, you know, take care of this, handle this, so that it's in a format that can be presented in community meetings.
And I agree with that, but I also think we need to show the citizens in the community that, hey, this is an idea. This is an idea that we came up with. This is another idea that we came up with, and how we're going to implement it. I would love to be able to have a community conversation and say, hey, we're gonna do whatever this dumpster roll-off program is, whatever that is, and whatever the logistics are. Once we get that all fine-tuned and say, hey, in your neighborhood, we're gonna be here in June, and in your neighborhood, we're gonna be here in August, and give them specifics on things that we have come up with and ideas, and then also have them give us feedback and additional ideas for their specific neighborhood.
So what you're asking for, Commissioner Luke, and it might be even what you're saying, Vice Mayor, is this just doesn't define out, it doesn't graph out, it's not detailed enough. You just want a little more detail to this. So you can see when it says current and ongoing, where and what is
Where and
actually.
when, exactly.
Sidewalk gaps.
Or what gaps in those 5 neighborhoods are going to be addressed? Right, because, you know, because we have this program where we try to take care of it. But we called these 5 neighborhoods out. We need to follow through with this project and say, these are the gaps, and this is, you know, how we're going to address it in these neighborhoods.
Yeah, and I'd like to see it be not a 5 or 10-year plan, more like a 2 or 3-year plan, so that we can move on to the next neighborhood and move on to the next neighborhood, and instead of just
I think it depends upon the cost.
Yeah, well, I
Which
understand.
may be what part of this is, just
Yeah.
time and
Some of that
cost.
could be the researching of the cost too.
Right.
When it's current and ongoing, they're looking into feasibilities and monies and stuff
Like
that.
connecting sidewalks, if there's only 2 sidewalks that need to be connected, it might be minimal. And we could put it in the budget and get it resolved. But if it's a larger segment, we need to know those specific bits of information.
And I'm sure they already have ongoing, projects. It's just separating out those 5 so that we see that those are being addressed. We put the spotlight on it. We need to react to that spotlight. We chose to spotlight it. So we need to follow through with what we need to do.
Does that make sense, what's being said there?
Yes, I mean.
Or is there
I mean,
something you have
an
an issue
example
with?
of the sidewalks, we have an ongoing sidewalk maintenance and installation program that's citywide. But now, like you said, we've highlighted these 5 neighborhoods. Out of that program, which ones are in those neighborhoods?
Exactly.
That's just an example, but, yeah, I think sounds like what you all are talking about.
And then the other.
Sound reasonable to you?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, the other thing is home safety inspections and smoke detector things. A lot of people that I talk to don't even know our fire department does this. And this is, again, something that could be for the currents. Put it out there, let people know. I'm sure they would much rather go and install batteries at little old lady or man's house than to go for a burnt down house,
Or an injury from somebody.
Or an injury if somebody falls, exactly. So I think a lot of it is communication. And the current, not the currents, the North Report, sorry, old school, I think is a really good venue and avenue to get that out to everybody at one time.
I believe the fire department does make rounds, like door to door and stuff like that. So just getting the feedback of how many houses they went to, over this past year in those neighborhoods or that would show them too that we are addressing these types of things.
I think that's in the monthly director reports.
That's what I said, there's some of this stuff, it just needs to be extracted from the whole. So the spotlight, exactly right.
To the next report that goes out of, this is a program we do, here's how many we've done, that kind of information.
Your neighborhood.
Yep.
Okay, so it sounds like, so are we ready to move forward onto the map then? Because it sounds like that what you're looking for here, the first strategy you want is to drill into this and figure out exactly where everything is. So that way we can take an actual view later on and then say, let's kind of move this one up or move
And
this one
if
up.
we want to have community meetings, we've got something to present to them.
And
Otherwise, it looks like we've just dropped it.
Right.
a lot of citizens think that, it's been 2 years, we've dropped it.
I just want to ask one question on your timetable. Since we have the discussion and we've got direction, can we go ahead and move the neighborhood signs and the Nice Guys program up to current and ongoing instead of 1 to 2 years down the road? So I'm not going to wait for a sign 2 years. We'll go build our own. So
We can certainly move it up.
that's all I want to say.
Yeah, I'd like to see the signage and stuff.
Actually, it is ongoing right now because of this meeting.
No, I know, I just want to see it in the graph next time, not 1 to 2 years.
All right, so can I get a consensus to move the signage and the, what was the other one?
The Nice Guys.
The Nice Guys.
Because we're just getting direction and information.
Yep, so we have a unanimous consensus to do that. Good, Mr. Lee? All right, so I guess we're ready to move on to your map now? Oh, wait, do you have some? Yep, that's what I was asking.
I want to talk about this housing corporation and rental home identification. Oh my gosh, this really screams Big Brother watching every single home here in the city. And I need to get a much better understanding what this entails before I would ever consent to something like that. And I know it's 5 years out, but this I need more information on.
I have a feeling we'll be preempted on some of it.
And that's where I'm going with it too.
From the state.
Especially after this year's preemptions. But I remember discussing the rental home identification. All it was if you were a landlord, the city had your name and address on file. If something occurred, we needed to reach out. there was somebody's name attached to that home.
That's
'Cause
property appraisers.
we were having difficulties finding who the landlord was.
Yeah, so like you said, that is kind of the basic premise of it. I've seen where cities also use the program to do inspections to make sure that there's not uninhabitable conditions for the residents, you know, kind of that absentee landlord, slumlord type conditions. So I've seen where they've used it to do those kind of programs to make sure that the homes being rented out are in safe livable conditions.
I don't remember us discussing going into it that deeply, though. To me, it was just a communication to make sure we could reach out to.
Right, there's a lot of different ways you could structure a program, so it would really be dependent on your direction.
Can we do that? Short-term rentals. There's a huge issue with short-term rentals because a lot of them are not compliant for safety. A lot of them don't have working smoke detectors. A lot of them don't have separate exits and entrances, you know, like 2 of them at a house. Can we as a city legally do something like that?
We cannot regulate a short-term rental in terms of the length, duration of stay, frequency of stays. There's a set criteria that Florida statutes has preempted us from regulating. In terms of the safety, we're meeting our codes. They have to meet our codes for trash. They can't have trash all over it. They have to meet our codes for noise. They have to meet all of our codes for other reasons. There's just specific things we're not allowed to run. Yeah, they do have to do fire inspections.
Yeah, I believe they're subject to some fire inspections too, so there's some,
So
there's some opportunity for, I think, your fire department to.
I'll pick on me since it seems to be the theme of the day for me. If I rent out my home and the fire department can come and inspect my home without notifying me for safety violations and to make sure it's.
I'm forgetting the exact language, but I believe in the statute related to short-term rental, there's some terminology that it uses.
I'm not talking, to me, there's short-term
safety.
rentals and long-term rentals,
Right.
meaning you're leasing your house out for 6 months or a year. To me, the rules should be the same. It doesn't matter if you're renting it for a week or renting it for 10 years.
Right, and it wouldn't really be without their knowledge. That's what this program would create, is that they have to come in and register and pass inspections before, if you include the inspection component. But Chief Titus can speak to that any more.
Scott Titus, Fire Chief for the Fire Rescue District. The Fire Marshal is not here right now, so I'm going to speak to what I know, and then I can provide you additional information because I want to make sure that I don't speak out of turn. My understanding is there are very, very few instances. So the residential home inspections that we have are completely voluntary. We do not really have authority over a residential home. It's kind of castle doctrine type thing. So when houses are constructed, there are some codes and standards, but most of that is applied through the building department. We typically don't even go into residential homes and inspect them as they're being built. There's a code that speaks to where smoke detectors should be and how they should be located, but we actually don't inspect those. When you talk about commercial properties, at the time of construction, we do inspect those. But we typically don't go and inspect them once they're bought. One of the things we have tried to shy away from, and one of the things that has been taken some advantage of in the smoke detector program that we have right now, is some commercial properties like condominium units where there's 200 units. They'll call us up and say, we need you to replace all the smoke detector batteries. And so some of that has actually been supplanting that business expense as opposed to and putting some of that on the fire department. So the way we've handled that in the past is we have said, if any of your individual residents would like for us to come and do smoke detectors, we would request that they call us individually and we will come out and do that for them. The intention of the original smoke detector program obviously was to provide batteries and smoke detectors to people that couldn't otherwise get them, because we want to make sure that everybody has protection. There are some people that can afford them, but they don't have a ladder tall enough to get to their home. So obviously, if somebody calls us, we don't pass judgment. It's a great opportunity for us to go out, interact with the public, tell them about things we do, and so we really don't get into that. If somebody calls us, we will go and help them. The neighborhood revitalization project, it's been about 10 or 11 years since we did it last time. We are revamping it right now, but we actually went through some of these neighborhoods that you're talking about. We did a door-to-door smoke detector campaign where we knocked on the door, companies went out there and said, hey, hi, how you doing, fire department? We're here to check your smoke detectors if you would like for us to. We'll replace your batteries. If you have any issues, we'll replace those. Some residents said, yes, please come in. Some residents said, I'm not interested. And if they weren't home, we left kind of a door knocker and said, we were out and visited. If you can call us back, this is why we came, and we'd love to come back out and see you and do anything. So our plan is to do that again with these neighborhoods and also provide the opportunity for a home safety inspection. And again, as we go through those things, it's really to provide them just with insight for simple household hazards of things that we notice. They don't have to change them, but we would say, gosh, you know, you really have a lot of things plugged into that outlet. It's kind of overloaded. Some of it is common sense stuff, but it's stuff that sometimes we see things where in our own home over time we become callous to things, they become normal to us, where somebody else looks at it and goes, oh geez, and when we point it out, they go, oh yeah, that's not a great idea. So that I just wanted to let you know, like I said, at the time of construction, absolutely commercial properties, we do have the authority, but rental agencies and stuff like that, we, to my knowledge, have not been called to come out and do any inspections for any of the commercial properties once the certificate of occupancy has been given.
Thank you.
Okay.
So the purpose of the home rental identification is to just contact somebody if there's a problem?
Yes.
So isn't that information of the property owner, isn't that on the property appraiser's website?
A mailing address is, not necessarily actual viable contact information. There's no phone number, and you don't know if that mailing address might be going to a business outside the country. So.
We have people that are international, own property and rent it out from all over the place. One of the things that would be very helpful in a situation like this, if it's the direction, and we haven't gotten into the details of how this will be utilized, but there's a lot of property management companies that take care of houses for property owners. Like, I wanted to rent my house out, but I live in Alaska. If you try to contact me, that's going to be great. Good luck with time zone differences and potential language barriers. But if I registered my rental home and said, you know what, XYZ property management company is really the ones you need to talk to because they're handling this, it speeds up the resolution of problems.
But how often do we do so? This sounds like it is very, very labor intensive and very much staff heavy.
It is.
And I'm wondering what the return on that investment of staff's time and intensive labor. How often are we trying to get a hold of somebody that lives in Alaska that speaks a foreign language that we need to do that?
I don't know the answer to that. I'm not sure that we've logged that kind of information to know, and it might be coming from different departments, so I don't know that I could give you how often. It would definitely be one of the more cumbersome ones. That's why it's on here at a 5+ years, and that's one of the things we wanted to bring back was to get direction. Do you want to move forward with this project?
I'm not in favor of it. Just because if it was something that you had a immediate need and you could pinpoint, yes, we've had, so you would know if you've had to contact somebody and had run into problems in these past 3 to 5 years, you would know that. And because you don't have anything at the tip of your, that to me tells me it's not something that's vitally important. So I don't know where the others feel about the rental home ID program.
I mean, I don't really know. I mean, right now, we're not anywhere with it, right?
Well, it's on the direction.
Yeah, but it's in the next 5 years. I'm assuming you're gathering, what it's going to take to do that. You probably, I mean, that's why it's so far away, right?
Right.
It's because you don't have all that information yet. So I think as you develop that and they bring that forth, then we can really take an honest look and then say, well, here's.
Do we want them to spend that time, though, is I think what they're looking for is, do we want them to spend their time and energy to develop this housing corporation or this rental home identification program? Or do you want them to focus on other things that are more important?
I think with what the city manager said, it's going to be almost impossible for the homeowner because of the way some of these are done. But if you could do those through a management company, it makes better sense to me. Right? I mean, if you're...
And it is for code enforcement. I mean, and it's not a perfect system. We've had some that there are management companies out there. We notify them, and then all of a sudden, and they are managing too many. They don't get back to us anyway. The specific instance that enters my head was on an impinging growth issue. We sent them notice, we sent them certified notice, they still didn't respond. We went ahead and took care of it according to our code. Then they got the bill and said, that's outrageous, we would have done it ourselves had we known. Like, we did know. But it's not a perfect science. My thoughts on this would be more of kind of like a database, so that anybody wanting to know who do you contact. It's obviously not the highest priority on our list either, which is why it's the 5+ year. Because we haven't looked into or discussed again, the logistics of how that would work out, if it would work out. But if it's something you wanted us to explore, that's why it's on the list as an option.
I don't mind it staying there and seeing where the next couple of years brings us. It's not as though they're going to be working on it tomorrow. I mean,
I want to give Frank Miles, Director of Neighborhood Development Services, and I hate to keep bringing that up, but I was involved with previous communities.
This is not the first place that Mr. Miles has worked.
We had issues with rental property, and one community was located in a college community, and we had turnover. Folks rented out their property to students. We had numerous students that would be crammed into these spaces, and we had all kinds of issues with that. Another community that I was employed at was adjacent to an Air Force base, and we had high rates of turnover as the service folks rotated in and out. We developed programs that we tracked the rental properties. We were working with, we had a water company, so we were able to turn the water on and off and actually monitor the rental units themselves and their turnover, and with the thought being that the city fathers and mothers felt that those folks that were renting did not care enough about the property. The owners did, and there was just some philosophical underpinnings, I guess, with that. Now, realizing here in Florida, the state has preempted a lot of the abilities of the communities to manage rentals. But in my view, as I read, and I get the same, or some of the same information that you all have received, that in Tallahassee there's a push and a tug to deal with the short-term rental issue. We had a company come in a couple of weeks ago and said that they have identified about 266 rental units. Well, we know that there are probably many more than that, but they were offering a service where they would look at water bills and power bills and that to be able to identify that. So it's just a policy question whether the commission wants to pursue more aggressive management of rental properties and what you can and can't do in light of the state and other factors.
I would venture to say if you're at a 5+ year, you probably hadn't even looked at this yet. It's just in your, really dug in much.
Yeah, we've looked at copies of ordinances. As I mentioned, I worked for another city that had done something like this. We actually had a brief webinar over a company that does this, and this was back during when the grant was actually going on. So we've done some preliminary research. We could always bring it back as a discussion item later to present some more.
Yeah, I guess what I was saying was to go kind of with what Commissioner Luke was saying, is it's so far out there, you're really not going to put too much time into it yet, but I don't want to take it off because, one, I think the state may just preempt all of it anyways, it may not matter. Two, as we move forward closer to it, we may decide as we grow, this is something we actually need to look into. I'm not sure yet until we kind of get closer to it, if that kind of makes sense. That's kind of my thought behind it.
feedback from these communities definitely were the people who rented didn't care for the same thing as what you just stated. So that was why it was being discussed at that point in time too. So there would be an avenue to reach the landlord. So no, I don't want it taken off of the table.
But is that our role to reach the landlord when there's a problem between a renter and a landlord?
It's not disputes of that. It's code enforcement and you know, abandoned homes and you know, it's more code.
To know where those are
Well, that's abandoned
located.
home registry, that's something totally different.
Well, yeah, but I mean, to know where these rental units are maybe is, I think as we get closer, we'll be able to decide whether or not it really factors in or plays, because you're not really putting too much into it today, because it's 5 years down the road. What do you think, Commissioner Emmett?
I'm fine with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, down the road, we may even be able to pick and choose a few different avenues that we want to look at, once the information comes in. There's possibilities.
There might be a system come through that's gonna make it extremely easy
So
in
we're
2
gonna
years.
we'll leave it at the very back end, because it's not that important to any of us, and it'll be in there by a consensus. Okay, so let's move on
Hold
to
on,
the.
hold on.
Yeah, one
the-
more, because
well-
because I want to finish this before the hour's up,
I
because we have a
understand.
time certain. at
I
1.
understand. The utilities department, something about interior plumbing and insurance and stuff like that. I just wanted to bring it to everybody's attention. I am not sure if it's the FLC or the NLC has a utilities line program. And I mentioned this shortly after our city manager took the helm. And I don't know if you had ever reached out to them or they reached out to you, or if any information has been, but it sounds like it might be something worthwhile. It's something that the citizens sign up for. It's given to, the information's given through the utility bill. And it helps with the lines in their home.
Yes, it's through National League of Cities, actually. They just emailed me again this morning. We've been communicating back and forth. I've met with them a couple times. They have some new information they want to develop, and I literally, while we were sitting here, one of the emails I've addressed was to have Marilyn set up that meeting with, I believe his name is Mr. Zell.
Yeah.
Through the National League of Cities. It's like an insurance program that you can buy, and you're correct, we just get the information out. It's not something a service the city provides, it's information the city provides so people can have access to that service.
Right, and it's through National League of Cities, so I would think it's more trustworthy as opposed to a fly-by-night, hey, we're in your area. So I just wanted to make sure that everybody was aware of that, and maybe city manager can get us more information on that for our next conversation too.
Yep. Like I said, we're working on scheduling the meeting right now, so whatever information I can get from them on that, we'll get out to you all as well, so you have that, and we'll get that out to everybody. It's a good program. When I met with them last time, it sounds like a very good program, so that if you have an issue with your utilities, we have an employee that has a major utility issue at their house, and I'm sure that something like this would certainly help out for anybody that's going through something like that, because it's expensive to deal with.
All right, let's move on. City neighborhoods.
Can we back up one quick statement, because we lumped the,
Yes,
I know, I apologize. Hey, I've been here 3 times. At least I can do it.
One
For
more
free,
time.
for free.
One more time.
Just because we lumped in the registration idea with the Housing Corporation, and they're 2 separate issues. Just as a reminder, just to touch on the Housing Corporation, it's really more of a community nonprofit type driven thing with support from the city, really envisioning it more of a seed funding for rehabilitation of housing. Because the whole point to this, the goal was we didn't want dilapidated housing. We didn't want the community to fall apart and not have an outlet. So housing corporations have been probably mixed, but there's been successes obviously for them in communities, and this might be just simply an area where you would provide the support of the creation of it, not the funding of it, not public dollars, and then maybe whether it's through hospitals donation, because they need their employees to live near. They seed money that then helps rehabilitate their housing so it's livable condition. Then you can get new people in living in the community, that kind of thing. That's really what the Housing Corporation concept was. So it's just something, again, long-term to explore and see where that fits in with you. It wasn't a regulatory or invasive tool to monitor. I just want to split those 2 out.
This is why I didn't want you to go ahead. Go ahead.
We have an abandoned home list, right?
We do have a registry of abandoned
Okay,
homes.
so what's, I'm trying to understand the difference.
Housing Corporation there's private funds available for rehabilitation, not for a list, but for rehabilitation. So I'm a new employee, or a new nurse or doctor at the hospital, or a teacher. There's different ways you can set it up of who's prioritized. You have target generally jobs. You want to get them into the neighborhood to rehabilitate those homes. So then there's funding, whether it's low interest or grant opportunities to fund the rehabilitation of rundown homes in those neighborhoods. You target these neighborhoods because, as we talked about, blight and running down will spread. And so the more you can turn over those homes into rehabilitating, making them newer, then you can improve the community as a whole. So that fund kind of operates as itself, whether it's neighborhood by neighborhood or community section by community. So it really needs to be established on its own. but it can be set up by private sector. It just needs to have the support and the willingness from the community, the city, to say, yes, this is a good thing for us. Whether it's helping on the code side, whether, you know, setbacks. If you have a non-conforming setback, now you can't rehabilitate your house, so the house is going to deteriorate. There's different things there on your codes that you could also alleviate and reduce to be able to help them continue and have the home stay in place.
I would much rather see that move forward as opposed to a 5-year thing to more of a, you know, a 2-year thing. And I'd be more interested in seeing the list of how many homes are on there. I didn't know we had a list or how many are on that list. I would like to see it if that's possible. But personally, I'd like to see that move forward a little bit more so we could get some of these dilapidated homes rehabilitated in a different manner.
And a lot of them might not be dilapidated as far as the housing corporation part. It may be somebody's living in it and they can't sell it because there's no money to put into it and they don't have any equity. They don't have opportunities to do that. So a new person moving in to rehabilitate that house, that's what the housing corporation generally is for. It's just a private sector funding, and basically you repay that loan and then it feeds into itself.
It's not a loan through the city or anything.
No, okay. That's the point. The city would just be, here we support this, this is an opportunity for us to coordinate, but not funds, public funds, correct?
Yeah, like I said.
Similar to opportunity zone for commercial, but this is residential.
Correct. Yes.
I'd be more inclined to move that up in the list of things as opposed to 5 years out and forgotten about, because this sounds like it would be more helpful to rehabilitate the neighborhoods and stuff.
And I envision it just as your administrative coordinated effort to bring it together, but then it's somebody else doing it, a private corporate, separate nonprofit doing it.
So you want to move that housing corporation to 1-2 years?
12 to 18 months.
I'd like to leave it long range, personally myself. I think there's enough on the table that's short range that we need to address rather than setting up opportunity zones through private sector.
Very much.
I'm with Joel on this one, I'd leave it alone.
Okay, I actually wouldn't mind moving it up, but it's going to die because it's 2-2.
Yeah, I think this is one of those things that could really help get that jump start in the neighborhoods. But
So we're not going to do anything with
Find a
that?
private sector that will come do it and we can move it through. But,
Well, I
but
agree.
to spend time looking for somebody.
It's 2-2 for the consensus. Okay, but now we are going to move on. We're going to move on to the map.
Okay, so this was a direction to bring the neighborhood maps back. I believe it was during the adoption of the EAR in 2016. I couldn't find too much about what the discussion was supposed to be around, so I just wanted to, sorry, I thought there were more maps in there, talk about kind of generally how these neighborhoods were formed, and do we want to leave our neighborhoods this way, or do we want to take a different way to look at our neighborhoods? So the neighborhoods right now are generally formed by geographical features, canals, roads, basically anything that's limiting to them. As you can see on the map, it's not up, but, so if you look at the maps that are in your backup, there's some of them are very large. I think there's some that cover like the entirety of Chamberlain, for example. And that's not really going to be a neighborhood feel. So one of the things we just wanted to talk about, do we want to reevaluate how our neighborhoods have been formed and what the boundaries of these are? So one of the things in planning that we often talk about with neighborhoods is that you can have access to everything you need within a 5-minute walk. So do we want to take some of those key things that people need and do a 5-minute walk radius out and see what neighborhoods fall within, or what areas fall within that? We might be able to identify gaps in transportation that way. Maybe if we just put a pedestrian bridge, they would suddenly have everything they needed within that area. So I think that's kind of the general conversation today. I'll try to keep it pretty short and sweet, but we'd like to see if there's direction to move forward with looking at these in a different way. So
you're saying that, like, as an example, you got South Cranberry here, which practically goes from border to border.
Right.
You're saying because you are accurate, that north of Price is a completely different neighborhood than down by, it's a completely different feel. Everything is different. So what you're saying is you would like to see whether or not we would like to take that for an example and break it up into 5 different neighborhoods.
Right. Do we want to look at these? I mean, if you're talking about that community feel and really getting people to have that neighborhood sense of identity, are you going to have it with all of Cranberry Boulevard from 41 to Price? you're not gonna know everyone in that
Now,
area.
if you're saying to walk to get everything they need within 5 minutes, are you talking about more of the neighborhood commercials being established also?
Not necessarily. I mean, it's a general planning concept and it won't apply to Northport. We're too spread out for something that broad. It's honestly never gonna happen here, but we could see where we have areas where that can happen. We might have an area where you have almost everything you need within that neighborhood.
I kind of think you start with those neighborhood commercials
That was
and
one of the-
spread out from there.
That would be one of the focus points
Okay,
to start
thank you.
with building those 5-minute. You'd look at those. You'd look at schools, churches, any of those bigger things throughout your
And I
neighborhoods.
think for me to look at this map just like this, it's very random, since I don't know where anything is located in it, kind of like what you were saying, where are those neighborhood development, commercial developments? Maybe having information about that, having it
Or an overlay of it, yeah.
Right.
overlay so we can actually see where is a good dividing line,
Right.
Vice Mayor?
Yeah, I like how it's already done on that map with the, 71 different neighborhoods. But I'd also understand what you're saying. Cranberry is, north to south is, 5-6 miles long, same with Chamberlain, and you have it split up with Price Boulevard, basically separating them on the map. So you could probably just say, instead of, I think it was like 31 north and 31 south, whatever the map number was, I'm just picking a number, and you had it split up, just that's one neighborhood and this is another neighborhood, instead of one long contiguous one. The other thing I noticed is on your city neighborhoods, you've got 71 of them, but in the backup material for the attachment and in the comp plan, they do not have 71 of them.
No.
There are many that are missing from our comp plan, and that is what the direction was, to get that updated.
Okay, that makes more sense now. I lost that in the
That's what the direction was, because these neighborhoods are not in the comp plan.
Right, and I believe the reason that was done that way, I wasn't part of when these were done originally, is that there's certain ones that have neighborhood-specific policies, and so maybe they felt there weren't ones needed for all of them, but we can definitely revisit adding all of those into there.
Yeah, I don't know, but if that is a neighborhood in our city, it should be in our comp plan.
I agree.
And maybe designated as like a CDD or or some HOA or something like that. The other thing is that I noticed that number 12 and I think it's 57, the names in the comp plan, they have the map, but the names are different.
Okay.
So that needs to be
Let's call it the
consistent.
jive,
Yeah, absolutely, we can update that.
And this neighborhood map was done in October of 2016. I'm sure that things have been updated since then, because there's a parcel we annexed into the city, 2 of them, since that time, and that's not in here. So I think it's really important that when we're looking at these kind of maps, that they be more current and reflect.
Yeah, it is a map from the comprehensive plan, so in order to update it, we do have to do a comprehensive plan amendment.
Gotcha.
And so that's what we wanted to look at, all of the neighborhoods and update it all in one package.
So what is it going to take to update the comp plan to include those 71 maps?
It would be a comprehensive plan amendment that staff would have to work on and bring forward.
And I don't know what in your English that means. I mean, is it like money? Is it like 6 months? Is it?
Time would be the biggest thing for us. We would have the staff to do it.
Is it a requirement that it be done?
I don't believe, you mean from like the state for the comprehensive plan requirements, or?
Yeah. But this was supposed to be included with that comp plan amendment.
I'd have to go back and look. I didn't see this specific, like what you just mentioned, in any of the minutes from that meeting. That's why I was bringing it back. I found a brief mention about them, and that basically Michelle said she would bring it back, and so that's what I'm trying to do. So.
All right.
Well, it sounds like really, to move forward on this, there's a few things we need. And I think for me, an overlay is necessary to really kind of know where we're at now currently. And then you'd like to see this in comp plan.
Yeah.
Or, I mean, jiving with everything, so everything's flowing good.
Absolutely.
Yeah, especially if this is the document we're gonna be working off of, it should have all the neighborhoods in the attachment. You know, I don't know what the,
These were pulled directly from the comprehensive plan, and that's what's in there. Like you said, there's no other ones.
I didn't quite
Existing.
understand why the attachment 8 was in there to begin with, so.
Commissioner Luke?
I wouldn't, because I believe there's a cost that goes to changing the comp plan. I wouldn't change that until, right, until you finish this to see if we are gonna alter it. I'm in agreement with Mayor that there be overlays so that we can see where the activity centers lay with those neighborhood commercials within them, you know, set to this as the basis. I'd also like to see you guys recommend, when you bring all that back, how you would like to see it divided, you know, with a neighborhood commercial or with a landmark such as a road or whatever. I'd like to see you guys' thoughts with that too.
Well, my only thing is if we did that, we may change what our existing neighborhoods, Highland Ridge, you know, Spearman or Country Club Ridge or anything like that. I would not be a fan of changing what's already been in existence for 60 years.
Well,
That's not what was said.
I think what's being asked is that we just see where those are with the suggested, like where you would suggest to do that. That doesn't mean that it's going to be changed. And we can decide to keep that or not. It's, you know, it's just the suggestions and with, you know, along with some of the reasoning. Well, the reason why we want to do this one this way is because,
Well, and like what she's saying, that's a lot of the older developments. They're already built out, per se. I think we're looking at the newer developments and trying to create hubs out there going forward. I think the old neighborhoods will pretty much be grandfathered in as old neighborhoods.
It gives you the example too. I would like to see how large Fabian or Highland Ridge or that is compared to what they might suggest for Cranberry. You know, so seeing that overlay of everything gives you the total view of the entire city, not just certain areas.
I was gonna say, I think something we've learned from, you know, the neighborhood revitalization project is that these neighborhoods, in terms of being neighborhoods, actually function a lot better than a lot of the rest of the city does. These other neighborhoods were actually, most of the neighborhoods, I believe, were defined in the 90s when we did the comprehensive plan. So they don't have that, you know, they were established in the 60s kind of, they've always been there. The older neighborhoods do, and we saw that when those residents came out. They had that sense of community and that sense of place, and I don't think you see that through the rest of the city. And so we'd be targeting, how do we drive that?
It would help, I would think, with that connectability that we want to do, those neighborhood connections and stuff. And so if we do establish, you know, smaller areas, communities, neighborhoods, that connectability then gives more bite to it.
so it sounds like to move forward with this one, we really need some of that overlay and the things. We can bring that during another workshop or
Just a
meeting.
little bit more information, I think.
So,
Okay.
is there anything else, guys? Because if not, I'm going to close this one out and we'll reopen at 1 o'clock. We good?
Bam.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Meeting adjourned.